Imagine the moment. White smoke billows above the Vatican, the world waits with bated breath, and the announcement rings out, Habemus Papam. But this time, the new pope is African. How would the global Catholic Church respond? Would it mark a new era for a faith that is growing fastest and most vibrantly on the African continent? Or would it expose the deep-seated traditions and hesitations that still shape the Vatican's most secretive decision? Let's explore the real story behind the question. Will the next pope be African? And what does that possibility truly mean for the Church and for the world? The Catholic Church is at a crossroads. If the only criterion for choosing the next pope was where Catholicism is growing most rapidly, then the answer would be obvious. The next pope would almost certainly hail from Africa. The numbers are staggering. Africa's Catholic population is not just growing. It is surging at a pace unmatched anywhere else on the planet. In just 1 year, the continent added nearly 9 million new Catholics, bringing the total to over 281 million. That's more than half of the global increase in Catholics during that period, and it means that 1 in 5 Catholics worldwide now lives in Africa. Experts predict that by 2050, as much as 40% of the world's Catholics could be African. This demographic revolution is already reshaping the Church's identity, priorities, and future. Yet, despite this explosive growth, the papacy has remained out of Africa's reach for over 1,500 years. The last African pope, Gelasius I, died in 496 AD. Since then, the leadership of the Roman Catholic Church has been dominated by Europeans, with only rare exceptions. As the cardinals, those elite princes of the Church, who alone have the power to elect a new pope, prepare to gather in conclave to choose the successor to Pope Francis, many wonder, will they finally recognize Africa's central place in the Catholic story? Or will old patterns prevail? This question is not just academic. Many African Catholics, clergy and lay alike, see themselves as the future of the faith. Father Stan Chu Ilo, a Nigerian Catholic priest and professor at DePaul University in Chicago, has argued that the leadership of the Church should better reflect its global congregation. He believes that an African pope would not only honor the continent's remarkable growth, but also bring fresh perspectives to the Vatican. At the same time, he acknowledges the reality. The cardinals are more likely to pick someone who already has a high profile, someone who is already an influential voice on the world stage. The challenge, he notes, is that there are currently no senior African clergy holding any of the most important positions at the Vatican. This lack of visibility and influence poses a real problem when it comes to being seen as a serious contender for the papacy. So who are the African cardinals who could, in theory, ascend to the throne of St. Peter? In recent years, 3 names have been mentioned most often by observers and Vatican watchers. Cardinal Peter Turkson of Ghana is perhaps the most prominent. He has served in several high-profile Vatican roles, including as head of the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development, where he advised Pope Francis on issues ranging from climate change to economic justice. Turkson is admired for his intellect, his diplomatic skills, and his ability to bridge divides between the global North and South. However, some question whether he has the political instincts and alliances needed to navigate the complex world of Vatican politics. Another name is Cardinal Robert Sarah of Guinea, known for his deeply traditionalist views. Sarah has been outspoken in his criticism of what he sees as the moral decline of the West, particularly on issues like abortion and same-sex marriage. His uncompromising stance has made him a hero to some conservatives, but a controversial figure in more progressive circles. Then there is Cardinal Fridolin Ambongo Besungu of the Democratic Republic of Congo, a rising star in the African Church. Ambongo has been praised for his courage in speaking out against corruption and violence in his home country, and for his commitment to social justice. He is seen as a bridge builder and a voice for the marginalized. But even these prominent figures face significant obstacles. Father Chu Ilo points out that, unlike in 2013 when Cardinal Turkson was a strong contender, or 2005 when Nigerian Cardinal Francis Arinze was widely discussed as a possible pope, there are currently no African cardinals with the same level of global prominence. This is despite the fact that Pope Francis has increased the proportion of cardinals from sub-Saharan Africa from 8% to 12% during his papacy. The numbers are improving, but the power dynamics remain stubbornly resistant to change. The story of Cardinal Francis Arinze is especially instructive. In 2005, after the death of Pope John Paul II, Arinze was one of the highest-ranking officials in the Vatican, serving as prefect of the Congregation for Divine Worship and the Discipline of the Sacraments. He was widely respected for his theological acumen, his administrative skills, and his ability to speak multiple languages. Many believed he stood a real chance of becoming the first African pope in over a millennium. However, when the conclave ended, the cardinals had chosen Joseph Ratzinger, who became Pope Benedict XVI. Why was Arinze passed over? Some say it was a matter of continuity. Ratzinger had been John Paul II's closest advisor and was seen as a safe, transitional choice. Others point to the unspoken but powerful currents of tradition and, yes, race, that still shape the Vatican's inner workings. The idea of a black African pope, for many in the College of Cardinals, may have seemed too radical a departure from the familiar. This brings us to a crucial question. Even if an African cardinal is qualified, respected, and ready, will the Vatican allow an African pope? The answer is complicated. On the one hand, the Church prides itself on being universal, a faith that transcends borders, languages, and cultures. On the other hand, the structures of power within the Vatican remain deeply Eurocentric. Despite the growing number of African cardinals, they still lack real power in the Church. As Father Paulinus Ikechukwu Odozor, a Nigerian-born professor at Notre Dame University, has observed, there is still a sense that African Catholics are not taken as seriously as their counterparts in Europe or North America. Sometimes, he says, it feels as if African faith is seen as a little bit below par, or even counterfeit. He warns that if Africans feel their issues are not being addressed at the highest levels, they may begin to believe that only an African pope can give them a true voice. But not all African Catholics agree that simply having a pope from Africa is the answer. Father Odozor, for example, cautions against tokenism. He argues that the most important quality in a pope is not his place of birth, but his ability to be the chief theologian of the Church, someone who knows tradition deeply and can guide the faithful in every context. He believes that the Pope's primary concern must be to build up the body of Christ, no matter where the people are, or how many they may be. For him, the real issue is ensuring that the concerns of African Catholics are taken seriously by those in power, regardless of who wears the white cassock. The challenges awaiting the next pope are immense, and the African perspective on these issues is both distinctive and influential. One of the most prominent controversies in recent years has been the Church's stance on LGBTQ+ issues. Pope Francis, known for his pastoral approach and his emphasis on mercy, faced significant backlash in Africa after the Vatican issued a declaration allowing priests to offer blessings to same-sex couples. While the Vatican clarified that these blessings did not approve or justify same-sex relationships, the move was rejected by bishops' conferences across Africa. In many African countries, homosexual relationships are not only taboo, but also illegal. The three African cardinals most often mentioned as possible papal candidates, Turkson, Sarah, and Ambongo, have all made it clear that they do not support a change in church teaching on this issue. Cardinal Ambongo, for instance, has stated that unions of persons of the same sex are considered contradictory to cultural norms and intrinsically evil. Cardinal Sarah has gone even further, comparing Western liberal attitudes on sexuality to the totalitarian ideologies of the 20th century. This unity among African bishops on LGBTQ+ issues highlights a broader reality. The African Church is, in many ways, more conservative than its counterparts in the West. This conservatism extends to other hot-button issues, such as abortion, contraception, and the role of women in the Church. At the same time, African Catholics are often at the forefront of efforts to address poverty, injustice, and violence. The continent's bishops have been outspoken in their condemnation of political corruption, economic exploitation, and the abuse of natural resources by multinational corporations. They have also played a leading role in peace building and reconciliation in countries torn by war and civil strife. Pope Francis, for his part, has been widely praised in Africa for his understanding of the poor and marginalized. He has spoken out forcefully against what he sees as the plundering of Africa's natural resources, particularly in countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is home to Africa's largest Catholic community. His visits to the continent, 10 countries in total, were marked by powerful gestures of solidarity. He famously rode through the streets of Bangui, capital of the Central African Republic, in his Pope-mobile alongside the city's imam, symbolizing his commitment to interfaith dialogue and peace. He went so far as to kiss the feet of rival leaders in South Sudan, urging them to end their conflict and work for reconciliation. Yet, even with this deep connection to Africa, Pope Francis was unable to bridge all the divides. His progressive stance on certain issues, particularly those related to sexuality and gender, put him at odds with many African bishops. The backlash over blessings for same-sex couples was just one example of the tensions that can arise when the universal church tries to accommodate very different cultural realities. The Vatican's response was to emphasize the need for pastoral strategies that go beyond the short term, recognizing that change in some parts of the world will take time and sensitivity. As the Church looks to the future, the question remains: will the conclave of cardinal electors choose a pope who reflects the dynamism and growth of the African Church, or will they opt for continuity and familiarity? The answer is far from clear. While Pope Francis has appointed a large majority of the cardinals who will vote in the next conclave, and many of them share his poor first outlook and commitment to a listening church, the outcome is unpredictable. As Father Chu Ilo puts it, he prays that God will give the Church a pope who continues the outlook of Francis, and he hopes that such a person might come from Africa. What do you think? Would an African pope bring the change the Church needs, or would it simply be a symbolic gesture? Would the Vatican's traditions and structures allow for such a dramatic shift, or are the barriers, cultural, political, and even racial, still too high? How important is it for the Pope to reflect the demographics of the global Church? And what qualities do you believe are most essential in a spiritual leader for our time? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your voice is part of this global conversation, and together, we can help shape the future of the Church. As we await the next conclave, one thing is certain: Africa's influence on Catholicism is only growing stronger. Whether or not the next pope is African, the continent's faithful will continue to shape the Church's mission, message, and identity for generations to come. The world is watching, and the story is far from over.